We're here this evening with Mayor David Held, City of North Canton, and the topic is comp time. I have received a batch of communications going back, I think, to January of 2014. Started out with Councilman John Snyder, former councilman now, bringing up this topic, and it probably was a little later in January that Mayor David Held got into the fray. Right. Give us a little background on the comp time issue in North Canton. How long has this been an issue?
Yeah, really what I was proposing is that when you have the salaried employees for the City of North Canton, for example, the city administrator, he's responsible for the city operation 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whether he's in the office, whether he's on vacation, he still has that responsibility. So with that, people will normally say that they do not have to account for their hours. At the same time, I believe that even though you're a salaried employee, whenever you take vacation time by law and sick time, you have to account for that. But I think that you should also account for your time, whether it's on a Saturday evening at a water main break, or whether it's snow plowing. We have our exempt employees that are snow plowing on the evenings and weekends. I think that there needs to be a level of accounting for the time that they are working. Presently, what we have, or what we've had over the years, is that the salaried employees would just write in 8 hours 5 days a week, so 40 hours. Whether they worked 50 hours, whether they worked 45 hours, it was just 8 for each day. If they took vacation or they took sick leave, then they would also account for that. So what I had proposed a while back is to just increase the level of accountability that we have right now. But that wasn't for the purposes of payroll, so that they could accrue comp time on their payroll or on their pay stubs. It was just really to account for the time that they are actually doing work.
So Mayor David Held could tell the North Canton public how many hours people in the administration were working. Basically, yes. Exempt employees or administrative employees who work for the mayor and or council, correct?
That's correct. Well, it would really be not for the employees like the law director and the finance employees. They report to city council. But administratively, I think that it's important for two reasons. Number one, we answer to the public. Even though you're a salaried employee, we like to be able to demonstrate that that they're putting in, the amount of time, account for the amount of time that they're putting in for the job. And in all cases, it's more than 40 hours a week, easily more than 40 hours a week. But I wanted to be able to reasonably account for that. Secondly, from a management standpoint, the city operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you have a police officer that may be putting in, or a police chief that may be putting in, or a fire chief, more hours in the evening or afternoon, we want to be able to demonstrate that if he wasn't in on a Tuesday morning working at the office because he was up at a fire till 3 in the morning, I didn't want him to have to take vacation time on a Tuesday morning if there was a Monday night fire till 3 a.m. They do need to go back and sleep. But sometimes that might be misconstrued if you have a salaried employee that's not taking vacation time, but at the same time is at home sleeping if they were up the whole night. So that's really what the proposal was.
Okay, and so it wasn't what it turned into be in terms of there being a log kept of how many hours exempt employees were working beyond the 40-hour week, so that they got time off then from their 40-hour-a-week
Yeah,
responsibilities.
what the intention was not to be used as a substitute for vacation time. It was to be used in order to demonstrate to the public, if someone were to inquire, if they're off on a Tuesday morning sleeping.
Right, I understand that point.
Yeah.
But how did it turn into something where Councilman Snyder, former Councilman Snyder, wrote an email and followed it up with a letter, so it became a situation where exempt employees they logged their hours.
Well, there's a couple of ways of looking at that. If you're logging your hours, let's say that you have a snowplow, a street superintendent that's doing snow plowing, and he's working in one weekend on a Saturday and Sunday. He's putting in an additional 25 hours on a Saturday and Sunday. That's 65 hours. So if he were to take off on the following Monday just to sleep, does he have to submit vacation time? Or could he just use the fact that he put in 65 hours the previous week? He could use that time, correct? So that's what we were attempting to do. Now the challenge that's presented is, let's say that you put in an extra 20 hours, which is not uncommon for snow plowing, but you can't use it up in that week, or the following week, or the week after that, because of the amount of snowfall or water main breaks or things that could be happening. So when does that person take that time off? You could argue, well, he's salaried, he could just take off when he wants, but from my perspective, I want to be able to reasonably account for time that somebody is not working here in City Hall. It's not intended for additional vacation time. It's really just to account for, reasonably account for the hours that they're putting in.
Well, what is the standard? I mean, you've already set the bar at 40 hours that everyone's expected to work, and it's a given. And it's been that way for years.
Yes.
That we know that exempt employees work beyond 40 hours. There was no comp time. Who precipitated the creation of the phenomenon that you just described? Who started this?
Myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the one that
and when
started
did you
this.
start this?
And this is in my conversations with our city administrator. That's what started it.
When?
So this was back. Actually, I have talked about this for a number of years.
But when did it get rolling so that people? I take it this is a recent phenomenon where people work to 65 hours and then started. Taking.
Yeah, they started to accrue it, and so there's one area. If you're accruing it on your timesheet, that's one thing, or your
when did that start? When it was loose, nobody really defined how many hours. When did we start logging?
This past year, I believe it was this past year,
January of 2000.
I'm not exactly sure of the month. I'll have to check.
Be earlier this year.
Yeah,
though.
but it was sometime in the past year. Whereas years previous, it was just there was never any accounting of it. And so the one way to look at it is, I believe the finance director started to place that accrued time on the pay stub, which was not what we had intended to do, because it's not necessary. They're not getting paid out.
Right. How many total employees are we talking about that are eligible for comp time?
Yeah, I think that it's maybe 15.
15?
Yeah. So when you look at the total number of employees and those that are accounting for that count time, it's just a very small percentage of the employees.
Okay. Now, how did it get started without an amendment to an ordinance that covers the time worked?
Because the present ordinance, what it says is that the salaried employee is to work the number of hours required to do the job. So it doesn't set a minimum or a maximum number of hours. It's just very vague. It's just, and that's the way that it's been for years. And so really what it is, if you have an exempt employee or a salaried employee that is up, working all night on a water main break, let's say on a Tuesday evening, or at a fire or an accident, and they need to go home and sleep that next day, and they're not taking vacation time or sick time, some might misconstrue that as though, oh, you have a full-time city employee that is at home. He's not working, but he never took out vacation time. So that was my motivation for setting that policy up. Okay,
and that's a point that I think you've made abundantly in our exchange here. But not all overtime are incidents of an emergency nature. It could be meetings and other functions.
Right. It could be a planning commission meeting. It could be a number of other things.
Right.
Yeah. And so, the whole thing is that when you look at the employee, from at least from my perspective, you want people that are going to get the work done. You could have somebody that puts in 50 hours a week, but if they're not getting the work done, it really doesn't matter to me how many hours they're putting in. I want somebody that's going to be working effectively. But at the same time, we still have to be able to reasonably account for management purposes how much time somebody is putting in, so that we can gauge, do we have one department head that maybe has more hours than another? Are we assigning the responsibilities equally? Mike Grimes is responsible as the administrator for the police department, the police chief's activities, fire chief, EMS department, water superintendent, street superintendent. So there's a number of different people working in various parts of the city, and what his goal is, and which I support, is to be able to reasonably account for the number of hours that people are putting in. So if there is a question as far as the amount of time that's being put in, we can demonstrate that yes, they're putting in more than their 40 hours of work.
I had a conversation earlier this evening with Gail Kalpak, who was clerk of council. She's since retired.
Right.
And she shared with me that when implementation was being considered of comp time, that she indicated to Councilman Snyder that an ordinance needed to be implemented or drafted and considered by council, and that Law Director Tim Fox put the caboose to that and said we don't need that.
Yeah, and
what do you know
that's
about
my
that?
understanding, that there was not an ordinance that's required, because my understanding is that however we are going to manage the time of the salaried employees, whether it's through a comp time or whether it's just work the number, which we presently have, which is very, very vague. Work the number of hours required to do the job. What I was seeking is through a policy and not necessarily through an ordinance. Well, it wasn't through an ordinance; it was just through a policy to have better accounting for the salaried employees. And so it's always good to have an ordinance for anything that you're doing, but it's not necessarily required. I mean, we don't have an ordinance.
So you agree with Law Director Fox?
Oh yeah. We did not need an ordinance. We didn't need an ordinance for
so
that.
You just,
but I'm not opposed to having an ordinance for it. For example, we don't have an ordinance.
Your finance director apparently didn't agree with you and didn't agree with Law Director Fox, and initiated
that's something
communications with the state of Ohio
and that's
auditor's office.
But see, I'm okay either way. I'd love to have an ordinance for every policy that we're doing. We can do that. I'm not opposed to it. So that's okay, because regardless of what the ordinance says, the present ordinance, you have that latitude of allowing the employee to work whatever shift or whatever time is necessary to do the work. So I'm okay with it. Whatever is going to be passed by the council, I find it acceptable.
Well, but then I've seen the
because
emails. Anything
that we pass,
I've seen the emails between Alger and I think Fox was
Yeah.
a part of it. With the State of Ohio Auditor's Office,
Yes.
State of Ohio's auditors saying you must have an ordinance.
Which we do. We do right now. But if for the
But for the comp time, you don't have an ordinance for the comp time, do you?
well, my understanding of that is that if you're paying out comp time and accruing it like we do in a labor agreement, when you accrue comp time, that you should have an ordinance for that.
And you
Yes.
have no such ordinance
Well,
right
we
now.
do in labor agreements. We
Well,
do it
but we're
because
talking
paying
about
out.
the exempt
Yeah, but the
employees.
exempt employees, there's no payout. There's no payout. There's no financial benefit.
So is that why you think that there's no ordinance needed?
That was my understanding for it. But
Is
I'm
that
okay
what
with
your
an-
law director was telling you?
You'll have to ask him. I'm not sure, but I can't speak for him or for the. Or I'm okay whether we have an ordinance for it or we don't have an ordinance. Either way, I'm all right with it. What I know is that we've got to be able to account for the time that the employees are putting in.
Well,
And-
are you concerned at all? Concerned citizens of North Canton brought this up last meeting. Stark County Political Report couldn't be here.
Right.
But I'd been brought up to speed from their perspective.
Right.
And they're not against comp time, as I understand it.
Yeah.
But they are concerned that with the State of Ohio auditor saying there must be an ordinance, the state comes in, the auditor's office does an audit, and are these employees vulnerable to having to pay cash back
Yeah,
into?
but see, that's the thing. Nobody's getting paid. Nobody's getting paid out. That's the whole point. I think there's a misunderstanding.
Well, you don't think time off equals money?
No, but there's no cash that's being paid out. It's not like.
Well, so you're hanging on some kind of a technicality?
No, you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. What if we can have? I'm okay with an ordinance for comp time.
Why
I'm
not?
okay with an ordinance without comp time.
But why wasn't it done then, back in January, March? Why wasn't it an ordinance?
Well, you'll have to ask the law director and the council member. If the law director says that it's not required, which is what he stated, the comp time is not required because it falls under the present ordinance, then I was okay with that. The law director said that it was acceptable. I'm okay with it. The law director said that he wanted an ordinance passed. I'm okay with that too.
Well,
I'm okay with. I'm okay either way because we're going to account for it whether it's in the form of an ordinance or not.
I'm told that in your other job, executive director of the Stark, Wayne, Tuscarawas,
Yes.
Solid Waste District,
Yes.
that you have a program like this in place there. Is that correct?
But what we do is we account for the amount of hours specifically, within a 15-minute time frame for the amount of time that you're doing. Yes.
So, and you've brought that from that responsibility to the city of North Canton.
Well, what I'm saying is that, in my opinion, the ordinance that we had now, it didn't have the same level of accountability that I have in my daytime job and that you have in other places. I just think that it's always better to be able to account for your time than not. And so I think that the present ordinance, this is just my opinion for our administrative staff, it's just ambiguous and it's vague. And you do not write in the start time, you don't write in the end time. There is no time at all. It just doesn't have a specific start or stop time. It doesn't say what days that you worked, whether it's afternoons, evenings, mornings. And so, my goal was to just increase the accountability. And whether we did it through an ordinance or just through a policy, we're going to do it, whether it's in the form of an ordinance or a policy. We'll do it at a minimum through a policy.
Well, let's get back to Ms. Kalpak. She told me that when she was employed with North Canton, she put in many, many, many hours of uncompensated time.
Yes.
And she said that exempt employees know coming to work for North Canton that that's just the way it is. And there was no expectation of comp time. And plus, if you're going to have comp time, she said, well, where's the cap? you know, there are many occasions for people to work beyond the 40 hours. So should there be a cap?
Well, I think that that's something that, each appointing authority is going to have to consider. What we don't want to have is somebody abusing their time one way or the other.
Who's an appointing authority?
Well, the appointing authority for the finance department and for the clerk of council, that would be the city council. And for the administrative employees, that would be myself.
And so, would you implement a cap for the?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And what would that
absolutely.
Cap? What would that?
Well,
cap
I think
be?
It just depends on what I would say. If you're looking at around 20 hours or so, it's important because let's say that you have in the winter months when you have somebody that's putting in a lot of extra time. It could be up to 20 hours a week. For 2 or 3 weeks in a row. Do I think that they should accumulate 50, 60, 100 hours? No, I don't think so.
What should it be?
Well, I think that what is reasonable is probably within 30 hours, 20, 30 hours.
Over what period of time?
Over a period of weeks. Because they've got to be able to
30 hours a month?
Yeah, within a month, within a few weeks. I don't think that it should be carried over. I think it's more to demonstrate that somebody is putting in the time, and when they do take time off on their schedule because they're working a different shift or they're working on a Saturday and Sunday, that we can reasonably demonstrate why they didn't take vacation time. That's what the goal is.
And to go over this point again, you have no concerns for the employees who have participated in the program now, which apparently was just on the authority of your letter in January of 2014.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with it at all.
I mean, but do you have any concerns that there will be a state of Ohio auditors finding that the time taken off
no.
Does equal cash, and therefore must be reimbursed to the North Canton City Treasurer? You have no concerns about that?
I don't have any concerns about that because what I know is that our auditor or our finance director that's why you have the whole series of correspondence between her and the state auditor. Whatever the state auditors want, we give them. I mean, that's my feeling. If they want something in the form of an ordinance over a particular policy, then put it in the form of an ordinance. I mean, this isn't really that complicated.
Well, but how about the water that's gone over the dam?
Well, I can't speak for all the emails and the correspondence that are taking place. Again, my goal is to better account for the time of the administrative employees. That is what the goal is. Right now, what we've previously had over the years was just insufficient, and so my goal was to establish originally an ordinance, but that wasn't taken up, so I established a policy. And if the state auditors want an ordinance rather than a policy, then we'll do that. But under the present policy that we have, we are covered. If you look under the ordinance that we have right now, we are covered under that ordinance because the ordinance says that the salaried employees have to work the amount of time or the number of hours in order to perform their duties. So whatever the policy is, we're covered. But I've always supported, whatever brings greater accountability. That's what I support.
Do you think that the concerned citizens of North Canton bringing this matter up is designed to embarrass the law director?
I'm not really sure what their motives are. As far as I'm sure that really they just want greater accountability. They don't want government employees abusing their time, or at least being able to reasonably demonstrate that they're putting in the time. And I think we owe that to the public. But I think also from a managerial standpoint, we need to be able to account for the time that the managers are putting in. So that if you do have one manager that is consistently putting in well over 40 hours, administratively, you've got to be able to demonstrate that and say, maybe we should change their responsibilities. Maybe you should add to the responsibilities of one manager and decrease the responsibilities of another, because it does vary. Water main breaks could be on the rise in one particular year. And when you have the water distribution superintendent, he's out there at every one of the water main breaks. There's a lot of hours, a lot of time. How does that compare to the street department when he's out there doing snow plowing? Or how does that compare to our water superintendent who manages the drinking water plant? So it's just for two reasons I wanted a higher level of accountability. And if it wasn't through an ordinance, which council did not adopt an ordinance,
which apparently is now in the works.
Which that's originally what I wanted in the first place. I'd always rather have an ordinance.
Are you talking going back to the beginning?
Absolutely.
You were counseling council.
I was always in support of an ordinance. Always.
Who were you talking with about that?
Council members.
But Snyder?
Yes. So anybody, I was always supportive.
Anybody else?
Always supportive of that.
Okay.
But whether it's required.
But your law director was saying you don't need it. So right. If you were in support of it, and he says you don't need it,
then we didn't need it.
I'll say so. What the law director says trumps what the mayor says.
No. It doesn't trump it. He's the law director. I'm not the law director. He's the one that tells us what we have to do and what's required.
Who runs this city?
I'm responsible for the daily operations. He's responsible for the law. Okay. So it's not like one person. I have one role as the mayor, and I'm responsible for the daily operations of the city through the city administrator. And so the law director, if he's the one that determines what's legally acceptable or permissible, and that's what we go with.
I've written in my blog that it appears that the law director is in charge of North Canton government. Do you challenge that may be an appearance?
Well, it's not his role. I mean, he's not responsible for the administrative employees. He's responsible for the law. And so, he gives his legal opinions and he directs the city from a legal perspective. That's what his job is. And, I think what's important, Marty, is when you look at government, you get into problems when you have one individual that doesn't assume the full responsibility of their duties, or someone that assumes more responsibilities than what they're required to according to the governmental process. And so I think it's important for me to recognize as the mayor what my role and responsibility is in comparison to the law directors, the finance director, the city administrator, the council. And I think that it's important that not one person is more important in this governmental body than another. It's like saying that, your big toe is less important than the head. Well, until your big toe is gone, you start to realize how important it is. Or your thumb. So I think that just because maybe somebody plays a leadership role or is the head of the organization, that doesn't mean that my role is any more important than any other employee. And I think that you have to respect what their role is and respect what their authority is in that given role, and that's a part of the governmental process. So I wouldn't say that the law director runs, the administrative department, or I run the law department. Not at all.
Can you cite some instances where you have said thanks but no thanks to the opinion of the law director?
Yeah, I don't really want to get into specific areas, but just because a law director gives his opinion, that's what it is. It's his opinion. But at least what I found is that in order for myself as the mayor not to comply with the opinion of the law director, I better have a real strong reason to do that. And there hasn't been a circumstance that I have found where I have went against the opinion of the law director. Now, maybe personally, I didn't find it favorable, or maybe I was looking at an opinion that would have went the other way. But at the same time, it's his legal opinion. That's what his role is. And so my goal is to work within that.
Does this particular issue have shades of the health care issue to it, you think?
What do you mean?
Well, that was a situation where nearly 80% of North Cantonians passed an ordinance that part-time employees was focused mostly on city council, as I understand it, were not to get health care. Right. And yet it was Dickens of a time getting that implemented.
Right.
So, this, I think the analogy is that here, even you say that, why argue about it? let's have an ordinance. And yet it seems to be a struggle to do a very simple thing. It seemed to be a struggle on the healthcare. You even weighed in on that. It was hard to get public release of documents. I mean, is this city, this administration, this council, are you citizen friendly?
Oh, absolutely. I think that North Canton is very citizen friendly.
Well, why all this turmoil?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that there's turmoil. I might, I would take exception with that. I mean, I think that really, when you take a look at our citizen survey, that we send out every other year, that the people in North Canton that answer the survey they're very pleased with the services that we provide. And I think that we're an open operation. That's what we try to do. Now, you're not always going to make all of the residents happy, but we do the best that we can. At least myself, administratively, I try to give. If there's a public record and somebody wants it, my thought is you give it to them. Unless it's healthcare or social security numbers, just produce it. But that's just my personal view. I'd rather be open and transparent with things because I think it just builds trust. And
does your law director share that opinion?
Well, you have to go and ask him. But I also look.
I mean, I'm asking for your take on
his role. He's an attorney. And his role is to protect the city from a legal perspective. My role is to work within the legal framework, the laws of the state of Ohio, the laws and the ordinances and rules of the city of North Canton, Ohio. And in order for me and the city administrator and the other employees to do that, from time to time we have to go and get clarification from the law director. That's what his role is. If there's some area that's unclear, that's his decision to interpret the law or to give an opinion.
In terms of his accountability, though, the reality is that he's accountable to 4 members of North Canton City Council.
He's accountable to all the members of City Council.
Well, but
he serves the administration and the City Council, but he's appointed by
a majority. Which would be a 4-3 vote, right?
Right.
So he has to keep at least 4 council people competent in how he does his job.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, David Held, Mayor of North Canton, thank you very much for taking some tough questions from the
I hope I answered them all.
Stark County Political Report. You've always been terrific to talk to the report and answer questions, so we appreciate that.
And if I could add, Marty, also, because I know you covered a lot of information, which I appreciate the questions that you asked, because you dig deep. I mean, you really want to make sure that we're running an open operation and how the dynamics are in relation to the administrator, the mayor, the council, the law director, the finance director, and the state auditor. But the one thing that what I would always stress, at least administratively, and I've tried to communicate this over the years, is that it's just better to put everything out there. Whether it's through a policy or through an ordinance. If we have council that wants to elect an ordinance in a particular set of circumstances, the more ordinances, from my perspective, the better. Policies can be interpreted in different ways, but the difference between a policy that I would set here internally and an ordinance is that the policy is done here administratively without the consent or approval of council, which we could have a policy as far as how we pick up the phone. I don't need an ordinance to instruct the employees how we want to answer the phone. Whether we lock certain doors or keep certain doors open from a security standpoint down at our water treatment plant. We don't have operational, ordinances that cover our daily operations. But in an area like with the time that accounts for the time of the employees, from the very beginning, I was always supportive of an ordinance. But at the time, there was an ordinance that was not adopted. And so what we decided to do, and this is an agreement with John Snyder, the city council president, we adopted it jointly through a policy. And now, if we want to go back and adopt it through an ordinance, I'm okay with that too.
Now, former Councilman Snyder did refer, in my conversation with him just a few days ago, to an executive order. You've never issued an executive order on this, correct?
No, what I think he's referring to
is the letter.
Is the letter, and it was signed. It's just so that we try to bring consistency, so that if you have employees in the finance department and employees in the administration, that there's consistency.
Right.
We don't want to have a different set of policies for administrative employees than as compared to finance or the employees that are reporting to council. So the purpose of the joint letter was, in the absence of an additional or more prescriptive ordinance, we put the policy in place.
Okay.
And so we can put an ordinance in place, and that would be even better.
Okay.
And I've always supported that.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with the citizens of North Canton?
Yeah, I consider it an honor to serve as the mayor of North Canton, and it's a privilege to do that. And just trying to do the best that we can and be as fair as we possibly can to the people in our city, and keep them safe, and keep our city services at a top level. That's what our goal is.
Thank you, Mayor David Held.
Yes, thank you, Marty.